p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And I'm really excited to have here a guest. He's been on before, who has a unique perspective, at least for the people that I talked to. I had the good fortune of being on a panel with him, put on by a local CPA firm. And rather than just, I won't say just an attorney, but rather than the perspective most commonly affiliated with, which is a sole proprietor attorney, our guest today, Joshua Driskell, is the managing partner for a firm. I don't want to describe the firm I want him to, but he is the big boss of the office and offices. Joshua Driskell, thank you so much for coming back with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it, Bill, and good to see everybody. So, as Bill mentioned, I'm the managing partner of our firm. Firm's called Lagerlof. We're primarily based in Pasadena, California. That's where most of our firm's lawyers are. We have a little over 120 people. 50 or so of those folks are attorneys, primarily focused on family office, family wealth transition, and all of the associated work with that. So everything from probate, trust administration, advanced planning. I run our family office group, so that's a little bit of everything when it comes to that. It's corporate taxation, real estate, all the fun stuff. And when it comes to probates, we do about 400 probates a year. So we've definitely done a couple and have seen just about every kind of weird factual situation that can come up. Heavily connected to the real estate community from an agent perspective, but also title company perspective. I have title companies throughout the state that reach out to me regarding weird probate issues that they have, or underwriting issues related to sales. So I've seen a lot of it, and occasionally I still get surprised. So maybe somebody will ask something today that still surprises me, and I don't know the answer, and that's okay too.
So
But
dig deep for your word
it's fun.
cases here. This is a guy who we're going to play Stump the Attorney today. If you have something that's really
My God.
unusual, what percentage of your business day is as the managing partner, and what percentage of your business day is as an attorney advising clients?
It seems like 100% of both, but lately, yeah. So actually, it's gotten better. There was a time not too long ago where I was, under desk hooking computers up and doing everything from, dusting the light bulbs to practicing law. But now we've gotten to a point size wise that I can really focus on the clients that I want to serve, which are the high net worth clients with sophisticated, crazy issues, and but also have the firm that I want, which is continuing to grow, continuing to expand, and really done that through both really good attorneys and associates around me on the practicing side, and really good administrative folks on the firm side. I'm lucky; I get to do what I love, which is grow a business and manage the firm, but also practice. I am our firm's continue to be our firm's number one generator of new business and work product, and through me and my group. So I know some managing partners solely manage the firm. I think I would be really bored with that. And if I only had to practice law, I think I'd get bored with that too. So it's a really good mashup.
So let's first talk about kind of the lawyer boots in the ground part of Joshua's business currently. So you do family focus, so that means transitions, and then I imagine you are trying to avoid probate by planning ahead and finding yourself in probate when there's contests or unique circumstances. So do you get involved in the actual estate planning? Is that something that your firm does? Or you have attorneys
Yeah,
that do that on your team? Or
absolutely. Yeah, so we get involved everything from simple estate planning to very sophisticated planning. At this point, most of the clients that I work with directly have taxable estates. So that would be somebody that has, if they're married, an estate worth more than 26 million. If they're not married, an estate worth more than 13 million. That number is going to change. So there's going to be more people that taxable event will probably move up for me, because we've got an exemption amount that's reducing at the end of 2025. So you're going to see a fair amount of people doing more sophisticated planning, just because more people will have taxable estates. Where that's relevant for this group is around clients that are approaching you around sales of property and what they might be able to do to avoid taxation. I do a lot of work with agents around charitable remainder trusts and other types of charitable vehicles that can really be a good, in the right circumstance, be a really good tool for a client. And the way that that would work in most circumstances, and I think Bill, probably the panel you saw me talk on was a little, this came up a little bit, is, you've got the client that has, a 5-unit building or a bunch of rental real estate. They can't sell it because the tax hit would be too high. They don't want to manage it anymore. They don't want to do a 1031 exchange because they don't want real estate any longer. So there are a number of good options. There are 1031 alternatives that we can look at. There are charitable trusts that we can look at where the person donates the property to this charitable trust and then in exchange gets a lifetime stream of income, or their kids get the lifetime stream of income. And, the best example I've seen with this working was an older gentleman that had worked his whole life building a portfolio of properties and was just basically bound to them, physically and mentally and everything else. Wanted to get rid of them, didn't want to be a landlord anymore, left half of them vacant, and but was afraid to do anything, afraid to sell them. And we structured a transaction where he sold a couple to give himself some cash, but then he also donated the rest of them to a charitable trust that he then took an income stream from. And the income stream from that was about 3 times what he was charging in rent. So it worked out really well for him. He didn't have any heirs, any kids or anything. So he at the end of his life, which he's still alive, but at the end of his life, that the charity that he selected will receive the bulk of what's left.
Right.
And that could be a really, really nice structure. So we do a lot of stuff like that too. And that's, where as agents, you can see those, you can see those types of scenarios where that is needed, right?
All the time. A multifamily, that scenario, almost every time they've held the property for 30, 40 years. They got lax on the rental increases. It's a little underperforming. They can't get the dollar they want because the rental's not performing, and it's getting harder and harder to raise rents. That's a whole political question. And it doesn't get better year after year. It gets a little worse, a little worse. They get older.
Mm-hmm.
That scenario I see all the time. One of the common solutions that really in my career has never worked for my clients is a 1031 exchange. Now, I'm just curious, your experience. Every customer I've ever talked to who set one up walked away at best and most commonly disappointed because they identified a property they wanted. That one didn't work out. A second one they're okay with. That one didn't work out maybe so well. And a third one they threw in there and now they're stuck with that, or it's not going to work. And so they end up buying either an inferior property or they don't do the 1031 exchange. You mentioned there's alternatives, but is that specifically 1031? Is that a common experience? Is that just my experience?
Well, I think it sort of is a common experience, but it's oftentimes the only option, right? If you've got somebody who wants to sell a piece of property and they're eligible, it's 1031 exchange eligible, and they're looking at either paying $1 million in tax, let's say, or buying a less desirable property than they otherwise might have wanted to. Oftentimes, the less desirable property wins. The key to 1031 exchanges is almost to have a transaction lined up ahead of time, right? So, it's not uncommon to have already opened escrow potentially on something and then doing a 1031 exchange out of the property that you are looking to dispose of. That's called a reverse 1031 exchange, and it works in the same way, right? Where you've already identified property X, or you have an option on it or something like that.
Right.
And then you go right into that other piece of property.
Right.
There are other options, though. Delaware statutory trusts are another option, and those, sometimes they're looked at as the 1031 last resort. It's like that sort of the final pull of the little thing on the parachute, like hoping that it'll slow you down before you hit the ground. But it can also
so that's a graphic image right there.
Yeah, graphic image. But they also actually have their place just from the beginning. I have a couple of clients in the last few years that have used these. They were older, did not want to have a physical property that they needed to deal with any
Right.
longer, right? They
Right.
didn't want to have a manager. They didn't want to have to worry about repairs. They didn't want to deal with any of that. And they exchanged into a DST. And DSTs are like any other mutual fund or collection of securities. Some of them perform better than others. So you need
Right.
to look at, the institution that you're doing business with, making
Right.
sure that it's the right choice. But in most circumstances, these are returning anywhere between 7 and 12%. Which is a great return for many people. Usually, unless the person's owned the property a long time, it's often in excess of their cap rate. So, it's just, you look at those options and you see what's there. The downside to a DST is that they don't last forever. At some point
Right.
in time, the DST operator will sell the property or part of the properties that you are associated with. And when that happens, you've got to either find another DST
Right.
or you've got an opportunity to go and do a piece of dirt again if you want to do that.
Right.
So, it's not a perfect solution, but it is an alternative.
Right.
And for some people, it's a better solution than doing it, trying to find the ubiquitous triple net lease, with Starbucks in the middle of, a fastest growing city in the world or something. That's what everybody wants, but good luck, right?
Right. Right. Well, I think the DST is a great play for the heir of the real estate who doesn't want to be in real estate. You can get a property that's very well managed by professional people with a track record, as long as you're prepared to flip it over every 3, 5, 7 years and manage a portfolio of them. It's like stocks. It's just another way to get out of
Yeah,
real estate. So,
absolutely.
so, so going back to kind of probate. So you guys are obviously, now you're going to be modest. So I'm going to, for the people listening, you're kind of at the top, towards the top of the food chain of attorneys, law firms on probate and trust administration. But you also deal with, I'm sure all the time, the one outstanding heir, the one beneficiary, the one
Oh yeah.
person who hires an attorney. And this is what we as realtors deal with a lot: is the one attorney who doesn't really do probate, but the customer comes to him. They somehow agree on some sort of a contingency arrangement or some sort of a fee to get things started. And it just seems like there's a lot of noise in the probate process, right? And you
Yeah.
guys are a firm. You have bills to pay. You have, and nobody's saying that you're overcharging, but it's not cheap to have good legal help. So you can't afford to get customers drawn into civil wars of attorney fees. So what are some thoughts you give to your clients when this is coming? And some of it's inevitable, some of it's the price of doing business. But at the same time, you want to set their expectations.
Yeah, and it depends on every stage. So, ideally we're avoiding probate altogether, right? And we're talking to clients proactively, and you guys are talking to clients proactively about utilization of living trusts and other types of transfer vehicles that don't involve the probate process. And primarily in California, we're really talking about trusts. There are transfer on death deeds that are permitted now. Those aren't super common, and they're also, a little bit of litigation hazards with some of those. So we typically would recommend a revocable living trust, having a trustee either as a professional person or someone that you trust to manage that process after your death. That person has the power, obviously, to sell the property and to make quick work of what is otherwise a arduous process if you go through the probate,
Yeah,
fully.
yeah,
If you weren't that lucky and the hand that you were dealt was not to have put the property into a probate or into a trust and you have a probate situation, probate works most of the time, but it works in a very slow, costly way, right? Probate is designed to make sure that the heirs get the assets that they're supposed to get, but it's also designed to make sure that creditors are able to get their fair shake if the person owed money. So there's all of these roadblocks, intentional roadblocks inserted by the probate code to make sure that somebody is, before any distributions are made to heirs, that everybody else has been paid that could potentially have a claim against that person. So it takes time and it costs a lot of money. $1 million probate, which is a pretty common number, is about 26 grand. So, you look at that and you say, okay, that's kind of a lot, and compare that with a comparable trust administration, it's probably half that, right? And much faster and, private and not, subject to a court approval. So there's a lot of advantages to that. If we've all probably been there as an agent. You go to a listing or you get a call from somebody and says, I want to sell grandma's house. And then you pull title and then everybody the only person who doesn't own that house is grandma, right? And so you got to figure out, okay, who is the party that is actually going to be, what do we have to do to get this thing ready to go, right?
Mhm.
And we come in a lot there because there's oftentimes, I'm dealing with one right now, a title company brought us in and says, hey, we think this is a probate, are we right? And the factual situation was, 3 or 4 people on title. One of the parties on title, it was 3 groups of people on title, because we have a 1/6 interest that we're dealing with here. One of the parties did a deed at some point related to their interest in the property. It just said, blank and blank, husband and wife. Well, that's not really a vesting in California, and it is and it isn't. It basically vests as a tenant in common if you kind of go all the way through and follow it along. So their question was, is there a right of survivorship between the spouses? And they know the answer, and the answer is no, which is why they asked me anyway to confirm that. But so there was no right of survivorship between these two parties. So now we have this 1/6 interest that needs to be probated. And that's not a fun case for me because there's really not a lot of fees in it, and it's a big pain in the butt, but it's the only way to really do it, because there are a couple other methods, but by and large, you need to probate it. Oh boy, we got the old Zoom giving me my my little emoticons when I talk with my hands. So we're going to probate that portion, right? And that's going to be the fastest, easiest way to get a person to be in control of that 1/6 interest to consent to the sale, right?
Because otherwise, you can't sell 5/6 of the property with 1/6 unclear. Can't get title insurance. Can't get financing.
Correct.
It just holds the whole thing up.
Holds the whole thing up, and oftentimes they're calling me once they've opened escrow. So there's typically not a whole lot of time here. You guys know that the average period of an escrow, it's not a lot. So we're almost always extending escrow. We're almost always doing some of these things in order to clear some of these title defects. But county by county, sometimes we can get somebody in a position in as little as 30, 45 days, and sometimes it takes longer. It just depends on the county. It's a mess, and that's a common scenario.
So let's stop there for a second, because county to county varies. But if you make one mistake and the judge can't approve you, then you get continued for 30, 60, 90 days or longer by county. Yeah. Could be 6 months, and the judge is not in a good mood about what you did. And that just adds to the time, right? Yes. Which adds to the heirs' frustration and adds to your expenses. And even though you get paid for it, that's not what you want to bill for, right? So I would imagine that both speed and accuracy the first time through would be critical when you're in those cases. You're holding up a big deal because of that one piece.
Yeah, it is. And, sometimes there are alternatives to probate, but by and large, they're not. And in a factual situation like that, it's important to be right from the beginning, because the costs of being wrong are time. Right. The probate court is a court of equity, which is different than a court of law. If you think about a court of law, that's Judge Judy, right? She's looking at the 4 corners of an agreement, and she's saying, okay, you're wrong because of X, Y, and Z. A court of equity is looking at fairness among the parties, right? What was the intent of what was happening here? Who cares that grandma wrote her will on a napkin and she technically failed to meet all the legal requirements of a will? That's a great argument, but at the end of the day, we can see what she was trying to do, right? That's a court of equity. Mm-hmm. So in a court of equity, there are a lot of pro per parties. These are people that are representing themselves, and that is absolutely a recipe for a long process. Will you eventually get there? Probably, but it will be at the end of a very long road. And hiring somebody or bringing in somebody that is familiar with probate, that files a lot of probates, is super important, because it's not the kind of thing to get your buddy who also does family law to do that. They're just so different.
So I would continue that conversation. Just real quick, some housekeeping. This is Probate Weekly. We do this every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. You can come in on the Zoom at probateweekly.com. You can watch the replays on social media, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. Love to have you join us. If you're watching live, put the comments in. We'll catch them during the call or or afterwards I get back to you. We do have a comment on YouTube. Josh, this is a pretty basic fundamental question. The kind that my broker says don't answer because you can't give legal advice, and you actually are an attorney, so you can give legal advice. This isn't really legal advice. When a property is in probate and the judge appoints an executor of the estate, does the executor then have the right or the ability to assign the listing agent to sell the property?
Yeah, generally speaking, yes. So in California, if this is a California probate court, which probably is, there are two forms of executors, right? So executor is actually someone who is appointed under a will. An administrator is someone for someone who does not have a will. It's functionally the same thing, but when they make that appointment, they're either going to do that with full authority or limited authority. And the definition of what that means is in the probate code, but generally speaking, we're always looking to have a client in the administrator role that has full authority, because that gives them the ability to accept a listing or sign a listing agreement, which the limited authority does as well, but they can accept an offer and close on it without court approval. If you have someone that has limited authority, you have to accept an offer and then go to the court and have an overbid process completed. And overbid means that it's effectively an auction. Somebody else can show up and say, I know Bill was going to pay $500,000 for that house, but I'll pay $525,000. And now you've got an offer or a situation where that price may be driven up. You might lose your first buyer. We try to avoid limited authority probate wherever we can. And we find that most attorneys that don't know how to do probate file limited authority because the forms are shorter. And they just try to get it done faster. And it's like, well, okay, but this is, you're really creating a whole nother cluster.
And they have less liability because the court approved the sale, but really they're not
Correct.
serving the customer.
Yeah, exactly. You still have to give a NOPA, a notice of proposed action, when you are going to be acting under full authority. So you can't just say, I'm going to sell it for $50 to my buddy, right? The administrator or the executor gives a notice to all the beneficiaries and all the interested parties. And if somebody has an objection to that, they have 15 days to object. And if they don't object, then you can take that action without liability.
So I don't know how much. I don't want you to give away anything that's. I don't want to ask anything that's proprietary. But when you say you do, 400 probates, 500 probates a year, 40 a month or so, I imagine in your office you have one or two or three designated people who do the initial petitions, right? One of those numbers, something like that, most probably. Yeah. And so that person is doing either 10, 20, or 40 a month of just the petition that goes to court. And I imagine somebody's watching their rate of decline or approval, and if they make mistakes, they learn from them. And then if they don't make mistakes, they know what works, so they know what the clerk will do, what the judge will do. They learn from that process. And at some point, somebody in your office is pretty good at filing initial petitions that get approved in the first pass. Is that a fair summary of what goes on in your office?
That's pretty fair. Yeah, that's pretty fair. We don't get so the probate world will give what's called probate notes, and that's really a probate examiner that has looked at your petition and looked at it for technical deficiencies. By and large, we have very few technical deficiencies, and we cure those technical deficiencies prior to the hearing, and that's really the important part. Yeah, we've figured it out by now. There are 3 attorneys that pretty much only practice in probate court on the administration side. So they're there every day in some capacity dealing with a probate matter. We have 4 or 5 paralegals in that group too. So, probate is absolutely a big piece of it. So yeah, we've sort of seen it all at some point and, made the mistake and fixed it, all that.
So if you had 5 doing 40, that's like 8 a month. They're doing 1 or 2 every single week versus 90%. This is my number, but I have the data back at 9% of probate cases in LA County are done by an attorney who's done 1 or less probate in the last 12 months.
That's probably true.
I know it's true. I have the data. So my point is to people listening, if your life savings depend on selling a property, it's a probate, do you want to go to somebody who's maybe never done a probate petition or did one 2 years ago, or an office where they're doing literally 40 a month? And I think that at some point you get good at it, you figure it out, you figure the shortcuts, you learn the people. And I think that's one of the differences between your firm and the other. Now, the truth is you don't charge more than other firms because there's statutory limits on the fees
That's
for
right. There's
probate.
statutory limits on the fees, so we're basically the same price as everybody else. Now there are extraordinary fees that can be authorized in a case, and where appropriate, we charge extraordinary fees. Those are fees that are not covered under the statutory fee, and the code sets out what the statutory fee covers. But by and large, most of these are statutory fee cases. We are extremely efficient with these cases. We monitor our ROI on these cases, so it does not behoove us to take a long time on a probate because it's a statutory fee. It's sort of like a commission, right? If you're going to sell the house for $1 million, you're not making any more or less if you sell it for $1 million on day one or 6 months later, right?
Right.
It's the same commission. So it's always to your benefit, generally speaking, to sell it as quickly as you can, right?
Right.
And we want to settle these cases or close these matters as quickly as we can. Yeah, and I have seen firsthand, Bill, the unfortunate set of circumstances that an unfamiliar attorney can bring into a case. I have one right now where uh, just a series of unfortunate events. The attorney wasn't very well versed. They hired a somebody else who wasn't really well versed. They did a probate loan. I mean, it was just all a mess. And just looking at it in 5 minutes, I could have seen where a couple $100,000 more could go to the beneficiaries if just a few other, couple other ways of handling things had been done. And oftentimes you don't see that until it's too late. Just like the value of hiring an agent that's familiar with the neighborhood or the property, right? We've
Right.
all had those situations where you've got an out of town agent listing a property and it's sort of a nightmare, right? Either they priced it too high, too low, they don't understand the local conditions, they aren't familiar with the forms, the custom and practice. It's the same thing.
And so I try to tell agents who I coach on my team, either you want to get business from attorneys who are doing a high volume, or for the 9% attorneys who don't really know their way, be the source that helps them. I check probate notes on all my cases. I'm often training the attorney or the paralegal on the process, which I'm glad to do. I mean, I don't mind. There might be a great attorney and a great relationship with the customer, and that's important, right? That relationship is ultimately important for the customer too, but they can't not have the fundamentals covered. And I used to go to court every day. When the judge would ask the attorney about the probate notes, and the attorney would think they were stumped that there's such a thing as probate notes, you knew you're in trouble, right? You knew
Yeah. Oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah. It's like, well, have you checked the probate notes? Well, I'm not. Probate notes, Your Honor.
Yeah, like
What's
you should
that?
be living on those. I'm checking them every day on cases, and I had one where I checked at 3 o'clock. I called the attorney, but at 4 o'clock they updated, and I didn't have the right information. But I said to him, "Well, I check every day," so I guess I was a little early. Okay, so that's on the probate side. So let's step back a little bit and talk about maybe more the manager, like looking back over your firm versus other firms. Um, in the world that I work in, most of the time I'm working with sole practitioners, or maybe smaller firms, not firms of your size. Why does an attorney choose to work for a firm with 50 attorneys and multiple offices or more versus hanging a shingle? And what is the value proposition that you offer to get them to want to work with you or appreciate the value you're creating?
Yeah, it's sort of similar to the real estate world, right? I mean, you have some agents that are attracted to an operation like Compass, right, with the myriad of things that are going on and reach around the world, arguably, and connection points in all of the various places. And then you have folks that basically are their own broker, right? And they are doing their own transactions. They're doing, all the things that arguably Compass would be doing. And it's oftentimes really just a preference. I think the attorneys that are attracted to a firm like ours value um, the breadth of practice that we have, because it's not just probate, right? It's probate, it's trust administration, it's taxable estates, it's everything that could possibly come up in a high net worth family situation or in a company situation, right? And depending on your clients and depending on the type of practice that you have, it will matter where you are firm wise. Yeah, I think the people that are attracted here like the fact that we can, for the most part, handle just about every type of transaction. And those that we can't, we have the connections to get done through other relationships.
Where's your firm on the work from home, work from the office? Obviously, I can just see it on the hall. There's people working, and yet, but I know, like most offices, you're not back like you were pre-COVID. I wouldn't imagine. What do you have a policy on that, and what's your experience as far as that? Then, what's your goal as a managing, partner of the office?
Yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so we're actually an outlier in this. We are about 85% occupancy on a daily basis. So that means 85% of our 120 employees are physically present in an office on a given day. We do have some people that work remotely 100% of the time. For example, the primary attorney that leads our probate group works remotely from Auburn. We don't have an office in Auburn, and that's near Sacramento, and it does a great job there. But we view law as it's an apprenticeship profession. So you need to be present in order to learn that. And it is an important piece. We are flexible for people. I have a day that I work from home, usually once a week or every 2 weeks. I've done a lot of speaking on this. And because law firms and professional services are a little bit higher on the number of people that are in the office on a regular basis. But we find it to be really important, and it does help with the collegiality. It helps with culture. It helps with just all of the various pieces that go into handling a matter from start to finish. I absolutely see value in remote work. I think it's here to stay. It's not a fad, but there are roles that lend themselves to it, and there are roles that do not. And for us, by and large, most of them are in office for us.
I can see as in management, obviously that's your goal, right? How else do you change the culture? How else do you train people effectively, or as much as you can, obviously in person?
Yeah.
Do you see, are there attorneys new attorneys who come to your firm, are they attracted to that? And that's why they're joining you, or do you have to kind of sell them on that? Because I know in other professions, the younger people, like in real estate, on one hand, they want the mentorship. They just want to come to the office every day to get it. And it's like, well, so what are you saying to me? You want to watch YouTube videos all day long? That's not really going to work, right?
Yeah.
So how do you bridge that gap? Are you recruiting the right people? Are you selling your people on the importance of it? Are you creating a culture of mentorship within your office to keep people connected? How do you manage that as a partner?
Yeah, we're pretty performance based. So if somebody's performing well and they are looking to work more remotely, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. If somebody's not performing well, it's one of the first things that we pull, right? It's like, come in the office, we need to see you, we need to figure out where the problem lies, and then we'll rediscuss, you having a remote component to the job. New employees, it is a requirement. We don't even really but it's supervisor specific, and it's role specific. So if we have somebody that is a very senior attorney that's bringing a book of business and they're effectively operating as a profit center for the firm, I'm not going to say a whole lot. We don't have a policy on it in particular. But if somebody's a brand new associate, couple years, a year or two out of school, no, they're going to be here, and we'll talk about remote work over time. Because I can't teach you. It's not about you. Maybe you can learn remotely. I can't teach you remotely, and I'm the one paying you, so I get to choose. And that's sort of the way that we deal with it. And it has resulted in us having a considerably better percentage of retention than market. We did not struggle from the great laptop swap that was very popular a couple years ago, or the great resignation, as people would say, right, where everybody was sort of moving around jobs and all of that. We fared well in that. And a big piece of that was the culture that we had built, which is built around an in-person environment.
Yeah. I think it's so important, especially in management. I don't know how do you build a culture if you don't have that? You really
can't.
It's just, I don't think you can. I just don't think you can. So let's talk about a lot of people that call here mostly are real estate agents, real estate investors. They imagine that you sit in your office all day long. You mentioned that you do 500 probates a month. They imagine there's like a line out the door for real estate agents. You're handing out listings, kind of like the king waving his magic scepter of listings. But I'm guessing a lot of business comes from real estate agents, from real estate investors, from people who have relationships already built. So on the flip side, I see often, and I have a Facebook group I manage pretty large, where people say, who knows an attorney that does probate? And they'll name 15 people, and I'll look at the names and say, they don't do probate,
Yeah, who is this? Yeah.
Right. And so I'm sure you get people who call the office with the idea of referring business, but it just isn't any. There's a word probate somewhere in the discussion of what they need, but it has nothing to do with what you do. How do you vet the process, and how do you? I'm sure at some level, not you. You're also training your attorneys on business development. How do you help people learn how to refer you the business that you want?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to that question. I've always been of the mindset to be kind of going back to that apprenticeship model. I've always been, very open to providing support and help. Last night, the mortgage broker connected me to an agent. She says, 911, I have a transaction problem. Can you please help? I wasn't available, but I got one of my associates to jump on the call. It was relatively simple issue, but she was trying to keep her transaction on the rails, and we helped do that. We didn't charge anything for that. That was just helping out. And I know that she'll call me next time she has something, and, mortgage broker's happy. He sends me a lot of stuff. So happy to do that. Right. His loan's tied up in this too. So I understand. Right. So I'm trying to help him as well. So I think, I think it's twofold. One, there's a lot of people that pitch me for work. Right. And I could kind of give some thoughts around that. And then there's people that I'm looking to, get referrals from and that kind of thing. And when it comes for referrals to us, we're looking for an opportunity to make a difference, right? So if there's an issue or a matter where there's a lot of people depending on something like a sale or otherwise, right? We love those opportunities because, it's our opportunity to shine. We can show how we can do the work and fix what has otherwise been a problem. I love sticky, weird issues where, I kind of love it when somebody says, well, I've talked to 2 other attorneys and they don't really know what to do. And it's like, okay, that's fun, right? Because we'll get a chance to say, yeah, that's easy, or that's here. Oh, that is really weird. And here's how I would do it. So I like that. And then if you want, I can talk about how to best pitch probate attorneys.
Yeah.
If you think that's helpful.
Definitely.
So, and there may be some metrics around this, but I think by and large, the best thing that you can do is find the couple, 2 or 3 probate attorneys in your market that are really the ones doing that kind of work and get in front of them somehow. I've never been real responsive to things that come into me unsolicited, right? I think it's because of the sheer number of those, it's going to get likely lost in the fray, right? And if I know Bill or I know somebody else that's on this call or whatever, on a personal level, I'm going to be more likely to think about them if I have an opportunity to, make a referral on a property for a sale than if I just got a random call or a random letter that says, hey, are you selling the house at 123 Main Street? Sometimes I'm sure that works or people wouldn't be doing it. But when you're doing the volume that we're doing, right, if you're trying to get into that connection point, it's really about knowing the person. Everybody on this call only does business if they can choose with people that they like. Bottom line.
Yeah.
If you may be the greatest, this person over here may be the best real estate agent in the world. The numbers may show that they sell properties 15% above any other listing agent consistently. They've won every award, but they're a jerk. I don't care, right? I'm not going to use them. I don't make any more really if the house sells for 15% more or not. It's kind of pennies at the end of the day on my side of things. What I want to deal with is somebody that I really like, that I know will get the job done, who I think is a good person and I enjoy having an interaction with, right? That's really key. And I think if you can find those folks and find a way to add value to their practice, that'll help. Hey, what are your pain points when working with agents? What are your pain points on this? Or, here's what I have access to. How can I help you? That goes a heck of a lot longer of a way than some of that other stuff, which, like I said, may work, and it probably does, or people wouldn't do it. But if you're looking for long-term relationships, I think that's a key component.
In your capacity, as a manager, do you coach attorneys on business development, and what are the best, what are the best tips or practices for attorneys looking to build either probate business or avoiding probate business, family planning, trust, those type of work. What do you recommend, or what are the more common areas that you recommend them to get involved with?
Yeah, I think getting out there is key, right? Nobody's going to find you sitting alone in your office. They're not going to call a bunch of random numbers and hope they find a probate attorney or somebody else, right? So you've got to be out there and present. I'm a big proponent of speaking and providing, service to the community from that perspective, and mostly the colleague community, I would say, this type of stuff where you can be an educational resource to other providers, I think is really key. Um, sometimes speaking to the end client results in something and sometimes it doesn't. I think by and large, I like speaking higher level to other professionals. So kind of finding where your niche is, um, doing stuff that you like, right? So if you don't like probate or you don't like estate planning or you don't like family law, it's going to be difficult to be good at business development and something that you hate.
Right.
So finding the area of, in this case, the law that you like is important. Um, and, and then you start to look at just being a good corporate citizen and being a good person to work with on a client perspective, right? Are you calling people back? Are you explaining what's going on? Are you putting yourselves in the shoes of the client? Because more than likely they haven't probated an estate before, or they haven't, done a sophisticated estate plan before, or whatever. And making sure that you're being a resource, right? The difference between you and a chat GPT search is that you're able to take their factual situation, break it down in a way that is cognizable and understandable, and then help them apply what is being learned. And that's really where I think, if you do that and you put yourself out there a lot, it's going to be hard not to have business come your way.
And I think what you're saying there is you have to add the soft skills of human communication with the technical skills of knowing what you're doing. You really need both. There's no way to, I don't think, be successful in the long run in, as an attorney dealing with families or a real estate agent without having some of both. Or I should say, if you don't have both, you're limiting your business at the end of the day.
Right.
Great question from Brian, but I'm going to answer this one before Josh does because I have my own answer to this one. He says, "Don't you already have a go-to realtor? Would you even consider speaking with another realtor that does a lot of probates, or would you just say you have a realtor already?" He literally is on this call. We don't really do business, and I will say I had the privilege of being with him on a panel, and I think he's an amazing resource, and I learned from him. And I think other attorneys see me talking with him and appreciate it. I also know that there are cases where there's like two parties, and one party may pick me, and the other one may be referred to Josh or one of his attorneys, and they may not normally choose me, but they'll say, "Oh, I know Bill's a good guy," and will otherwise, instead of fighting for it, we'll say, "Fine, he'll do a good job for us." And so, as a real estate agent, I think that your job is to really do the work and not focus on the immediate results, doing the work of talking to people, meeting people, and educating people. So how would you answer that, Josh? You're going to talk to a group of title people or real estate agents, and they may or may not give you business or give the attorney a coaching business directly. Should they still do the phone calling? Should they still do the meetings and the education process?
Yeah, I think so. Because the only way, I think Brian used the word go-to realtor, right? The only way somebody would be my go-to realtor in that situation is because they did one of those other things, right? At some point, they did something to get on my radar that made me like them, right? And become friends with them and use them where I can. Um, and that person's out there for you. And very few firms do the number of probates that we do just because there's not that many probates. So if we're doing 400 of them, I mean, but there are firms that certainly do a lot of them. And there are attorneys that do a lot of them. And it's not just probate, right? I mean, attorneys have the ability to swing people in different directions on various instances, whether it's trust administration, whether it's just a divorce scenario, whether it's whatever, right? And you want to be the person that the attorney thinks of. It's also important, I think, to just find an attorney, find those relationships with attorneys or other professionals that keep their eye out for bringing in people that they know and like, right? So some attorneys will not have a dog in that fight, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't," they won't even think about asking a client if they have an agent or an insurance broker or whatever, right? Or somebody will say, "Well, who do you want to use for title?" Well, somebody who's never sold a house before doesn't even know what your question you're asking, right?
Exactly.
You're telling them who using for title, and then let them tell me that their best friend's a title agent, right?
Right.
So, it's sort of just how things go in that world. I think finding the person that person or persons that you connect with and that you find will add value to you, and you can add value to them. Um, Somebody probably will have a go-to realtor already, or somebody that they've used a few times, and that's okay. That doesn't mean there's no room for you. What that means is that you've got to figure out a way to provide value to this person that maybe that other person's not doing, or um, are they open to having you in the rotation of people that they recommend? Right. I absolutely have more real estate agents that refer me business than I could possibly ever refer out. It's just the nature of the beast,
Now,
right?
just stop 1 second. I think everybody has to hear that. That is the misunderstood piece of this whole puzzle for real estate agents. They imagine that all you're doing all day long is handing out, but if you're getting business from agents, they're referring to you because they want their deal done. So
Yes.
again, the large percentage of business comes to you from realtors more than you can refer out.
Yes, absolutely. And when that happens, right, that's the person we're using. I would never say, hey, Bill referred this, but have you ever really thought about using Brian? That's not going
Yeah,
to happen, right?
right,
Um, so yeah, I view it as, hey, they're bringing me in to get their deal off over the finish line. This thing is
right.
is having a problem somewhere. So it's not that often actually that I get to say, hey, you really should use X, Y, and Z, because most of the time people have an agent that they want to work with,
Right,
or they have, or the person's been brought to me by an agent.
right, right. And so Winston, one of our good supporters, a great agent down in Orange County, asked that when the PR says they have an agent, do you vet them anyway? Do you check them out? Do you talk to them before you get too far down the road, or do you just assume the client, they sold us our house and we want to use him for,
Yeah.
selling mom's probate? It's a limited authority with 18 different objecting errors. Are you okay with
Yeah.
us using this realtor who does one deal a year? How do you approach that situation?
Yeah, so I do prod a little bit there, and so I will say, somebody will say, hey, we need to sell mom's house, and I'll say, okay, well, have you selected an agent, or have you talked to an agent, or do you have an agent? A lot of times the answer is yes, or it's exactly what Bill just described, right? My brother-in-law is an agent, my this is an agent, my that is an agent. Um, and depending on the circumstance, right? Depending on whether it's a very, very, very simple transaction, one error, it's the same person as the administrator. I'm probably not going to say a whole lot if they want to use that person, because I have absolutely worked with extremely professional probate real estate agents that have done this a number of times, and they're great. And then I've worked with the person that I'm literally doing their job as well as mine. And that's fine. I can do that. Where there is a little bit more going on, or there's multiple properties, or there is limited authority being suggested, or there's objections or whatever, I'm going to push a little harder, and I'm going to say, hey, look, we need to make sure that we've got somebody that understands the process, because it's going to cost you money if you don't.
Right.
I get paid the same either way. Doesn't matter to me, but here's why it's important. Should be important to you to use somebody that understands this, because if you get into this transaction and it goes sideways, it's never going to result in you earning more. It's only going to result in you earning less. So, tell me about the person. How close of a connection are they? And oftentimes it's a friend of a friend, and it's really not a big deal. But sometimes it is the brother-in-law, and I got to deal with it. And,
Right.
those are the ones that I'm like, okay, we're not going to swing them off the brother-in-law, most likely.
Right. Interesting. So it's kind of the same things, and we deal with the same thing, right? Sometimes I'll have a client who will say, "Oh yeah, we have an attorney," and I'll look them up and say, "Well, gee, they're not in the trust estates division. They don't mark themselves as probate. They haven't done a probate in a year or two. How do I
Or
bring up
ever.
to them, or ever? How do I bring up to them? Maybe they want to find somebody else, and it's always delicate. That swings both ways, and I think that at the end of the day, that's where the professionals operate, is you figure out how to do that more effectively than the other ones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's sort of the same thing in reverse. And oftentimes I think it's probably whether how hard you're pushing on that's whether the listing agreement's been signed or not. And, if it has been, then maybe, you feel a little bit more okay pushing. Um, I think you're always good to ask that question and say the same thing that I say about agents, right? Which is,
right,
hey, if you don't have somebody that understands this process, it's going to cost you time or money or both, right?
right,
And you really should consider talking to somebody who does this all the time. It's not going to cost you anything more. And, maybe even there's an opportunity for the two attorneys to work together. If your guy or gal is not as proficient, that maybe they'll connect with another firm and have them help on
Right.
this. That happens from time to time too. I hate it when it does, but it does happen from time to time. So that's an option too. Um, but a bad attorney or an attorney that's not familiar with the deal is going to cause your transaction to take longer. It's just a matter. It's just par for the course.
Last question I have, and anybody else who has questions, feel free to jump in. Um, Seems to me that the bar when customers should use a professional person as an administrator. The bars it should happen more frequently than it does. Meaning, I spend
Absolutely.
a lot of my cases where they want to save the money and they want to be the administrator themselves, but they can't fill out the paper. They don't know how to do e-sign. They don't, and so things slow down. Things don't get done in a timely manner. Time is money at the end of the day for them as well. Do you have the discussion? Obviously, on higher net worth families, that's an obvious. There might even be somebody in place already that's professional that handles that. But for the one-off $1 million, $1.5 million, one time they're going to inherit a property. So often I say to the attorney, the problem we have here is the administrator isn't really capable of being an administrator, and they want to save the money, so we get somebody to step in for them. Is that something you offer? Do you recommend services? How do you bridge that gap, or you just bite the
Yeah.
bullet? Sometimes that's life.
Yeah, sometimes I'll serve as the administrator. I serve as trustee of trusts all the time. That's probably less common in a probate scenario. I'm administrator of a couple probates right now for individuals that the heirs are in a foreign country, right? And it makes sense to do that. We do recommend and work with private fiduciaries often. Again, it's not going to cost the family anything more, assuming that the family member takes the income, right? So, obviously there's a statutory fee for the administrator and there's a statutory fee for the attorney, and both have the opportunity for extraordinary fees. But assuming that the family member or friend or whomever that's serving takes the statutory fee, it's the same statutory fee that a professional would charge.
Right.
So, you're not really saving any money. The only way you're saving money is that person waives compensation, which is common among family members. I'd say that happens. I never recommend that they do that. I think it's a terrible job. They should do it. They should
It's
take
a
the money.
tough job. Like you
It
don't get
is.
rich being a fiduciary or an
No,
administrator on a probate.
not on a probate. No,
So a
no.
lot of I've done. I did. There was a firm that I referred this business to, and they asked me if I wanted to do it, and I jumped on it as a chance to learn. I was
Yeah,
sitting on my customer's seat, and I've done two now. That's a lot of work.
it is a lot of work. Even if you hire all the professionals, you still have a lot of things you have to do that is in the purview of the administrator. Um, no, you're right. It is absolutely not as used as it should be. We have that conversation all the time with clients around one appointing administrator or professional fiduciaries in their documents if we have that opportunity, or if not, the heirs nominating a professional fiduciary. But we're used to dealing with individuals on this. 99% of them do not have a professional fiduciary associated with them. They have a family member or someone who's our administrator. Um, so we're used to it. It's not a problem, but it certainly can result in a delayed timeline.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a thankless job. Somebody's going to be mad no matter what. And particularly if there are problems among the parties. Being the administrator is certainly not going to bring the parties together if they're already worrying about something.
It's never get better. It can only get
Yeah,
worse.
that's
Right? I have
right.
to tell them this is as good as it gets. Like you guys are getting along now. This is as good as it gets. The sooner we get it done, the
Yes,
better. Because it's like food. The longer it sits in your refrigerator, at some point it's inedible, and then another level it's dangerous. And probate, I think, is the
exactly.
same way. Well, look, we're up at the end of our hour. I just want to really appreciate the time you spend educating. I know I learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. Josh, if somebody wanted to talk to you or one of your probate attorney team members, they had a case, they went to the real estate agent or something, what would be the best way to reach out to you guys to bring you to business?
Email is awesome. Phone call is great too. I can type my phone number or my email address into the chat if people
Okay.
want to do that. Feel free to reach out to me. Title, escrow, agent, whatever. I'm happy to help and weigh in on a situation, circumstance. Um, it's fun for me to figure these weird issues out. And if I can be a resource, I'm happy to do that and help.
Well, thanks so much. We'll put your contact info as well in the description if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. And again, on behalf of everybody who watches us, Josh, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And for everybody else, this is Probate Weekly. We do this every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern. We live stream on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can see the notes there. If you have questions, hit questions there, and we will do our best to respond to them in a timely manner. Thanks again to Josh. He is the managing partner at Lagerlof LLP, which is in Pasadena, and a couple other spots. And appreciate him. Appreciate you guys who participated today. Have a great day, guys. Thanks so much.